Welcome to the Winedown, an afternoon podcast where two techie blokes sit down over a bowl of wine and chat about what's happening in the world of tech. Enjoy while Scott and Nick open up about their week in technology.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Lockdown Winedown. I'm here with
Scott.
Hello, Scott. How are you?
Good, thanks. And how are you going, Nick? Another week?
Locked down another week, and I may have to, as an essential worker, travel today. So, for what are we drinking and where are we? I have a non-alcoholic wine.
Oh, fake wine. Okay.
Yes. So,
actually, it's gotten a lot better.
It has. It's not too disgusting. What are you drinking today, Scott?
Well, based on what you had last week, I actually located a bottle of the Chateau Tinunda, but it's a slightly different variant. I'm not sure that's showing through very well. There we go. It's one of the Shiraz. The Cab Savs.
Yep.
So this is one of the first vineyards in the Barossa area, 1898, 99. Yeah.
Yeah, I had that pub wine last week, didn't I?
Yes, you had the pub wine version of that. Yes, it's a good winery. It's another family-owned winery. I don't think they've commercialised it. I don't think so. But they're Anyway,
so I've got to talk about today's like the super most exciting wine down ever in the history of super exciting wine downs, apart from all the other ones. And today we're joined by Radek who's going to talk to us all about networks and Starlink and SpaceX and what Elon Musk's been up to and what they're doing and all sorts of things. It'll be exciting. Should we welcome him to the show?
We should. This is very interesting.
It is. So I'll see if that works. Hello, Radek. How are you?
Hello, Nick. Hello, Scott. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's all right.
Absolute pleasure. We haven't done a guest in this live streaming format before, so it's all very nervous, and we're seeing if it works, but it seems to be there. So Radek's from NetVault. Why don't we start off? Let's tell us about NetVault. Radek, what do you guys do?
Definitely. So NetVault, we are a telecommunications company. We focus on three key areas for businesses. They are internet services, telephony services, and cloud services. And what we do is we work with channel partners all around the country to deliver telecommunication solutions for their clients and give them better value, better service, and more importantly, be able to beat the evil Telstra at their own game.
Cool. Evil Telstra on a public website. Oh, wow. I couldn't possibly comment, Radek, but it sounds like a cool mission statement. So this is all about Starlink, and let me see if I get it right. For those people who don't know, SpaceX has been out there quite often shooting out lots of tiny satellites to build this global network to effectively bring internet to every corner of the globe. Am I close on that one?
Spot on there, Nick. So for those that haven't heard of Starlink before, it's the brainchild, one of the brainchilds of Elon Musk. There's two big companies, actually there's a few companies that Elon Musk is famous for. The two most famous is number one being Tesla and the electric cars they're making. They're really revolutionizing the automobile industry and the electric vehicle industry. It's fantastic stuff. I've got a Tesla myself. It's awesome. And the second one is SpaceX. And SpaceX is a really interesting one because the mission statement of SpaceX always gets me. You tell me one other company in the world that has a mission statement that reads, and I summarize because I don't know word for word, but it's to make humanity a multi-planetary species. I.e., they are literally sending rockets up to Mars is what they're trying to achieve. They haven't got to Mars just yet, but they're certainly on their way. And I suppose one of the unique things about SpaceX is that they're the first company in the world to be able to perfect the art of reusable rockets, where they can send a rocket up into space, deploy its payload, and then land it back down on the ground so they can just give it a quick refurb, refuel, and up it goes again.
And I've got to say, sorry, Radek, you just hit on. I'm a huge space nerd, right? And so it's nothing like it. And if you haven't done this, it's something I recommend. SpaceX stream this all live. So you can go get at the right time. You can see from the final countdown. There we go. There's a hark back to 80s rock. Anyway, from the final last 10 seconds, all the way as they launch into orbit. But as they start separating bits of these rockets, these things turn around and go and land on barges in the ocean or right back at the landing pads. And that's just it's honestly it's 20 minutes out of your life. If you watch one of these, you'll go, that was the coolest thing I think I've ever seen. I showed one to my wife the other day. She went, that's awesome.
A lot of people think that it's CGI. It's like, no, this is Thunderbirds type stuff where they're actually landing these rockets back down vertically, and no other company in the world has been able to do that. They've now perfected the art of it. And look, it took them several years to be able to do that. They've even created a video that takes the mickey out of themselves of, how not to land an orbital rocket. And it's all these videos of them crashing in the ocean and exploding, this, that, the other. And because it took them quite a few attempts to get it right. But the last 80 or 90 of these launches they've done, bang, smack down in the middle of the crosshairs. They've landed them each time. And I think they're up to like 10 or 11 times they've reused one of these rocket boosters. It's what an exciting time to be alive is all I've got to say.
Yeah. It is. So I'm going to do more spacey questions, and then we'll get on to the applicability of this to anyone, because there's all sorts of cool spacey stuff. But so they're launching into space, and then if you watch one of these, you wait about an hour, it settles in orbit, and then it fires off a whole bunch of these tiny satellites. Now, if you've ever played Kerbal Space Program, which is a super little game, there's a thing they talk about called I think it's the Kessler syndrome, where you've got so many bits of junk orbiting the Earth that if one was to explode, it creates this ripple effect where everything in low Earth orbit explodes into a junk, and then nothing can launch again. But I hear SpaceX are actually taking all of their rocket, apart from maybe the Starlink bits, and actually returning them back to the planet, right?
So there's different parts that get returned to Earth. So the base booster stage, as in where most of the cost is and most of the action, I suppose, happens to leave the atmosphere, that lands back down on Earth. What's called the payload fairing, as in the capsule that protects the satellites, that drops off and lands back in the ocean where they retrieve those. The satellites themselves stay in orbit, but there are a few things that they jettison off that they don't particularly care about. But yes, that problem that you mentioned, with so much space junk, is a common sort of question that people raise. Aren't we just making that problem worse by launching more and more stuff into space? And I suppose there is a solution that SpaceX have to these, as far as the Starlink satellites themselves are concerned. When they launch the satellites, they launch them at about 100, 150 kilometers above the Earth. They still need to raise to get to their final orbit. So they've got onboard ion thrusters that actually move them to the correct locations and put them into the relevant orbits so that they can cover the relevant areas that they want.
I've got to stop you, Radek. I've got to dive in. Did you just say ion thruster?
I did indeed. Onboard ion thrusters.
Real Star Trek-y ion thruster.
Yeah.
Cool.
This is if you're a SpaceX a Starlink fan or a Stargate SG-1 Star Wars sort of fan, this stuff is happening now. Elon Musk is actually literally doing what we've dreamed about in science fiction.
That's where a lot of this has come from, though. When it's the ideas that have been thought up in these movies and these sci-fi TV series, people have seen that and hang on, I get that that's a TV show and that's all fake, but I think I could work out how to do that. And maybe it's a few years go by and you get a very early version of it, but it sort of evolves from there, and the initial thought becomes reality, and then all of a sudden, hey, it's in everyday life. It's very impressive.
Well, 20 years ago is when SpaceX was founded, and it's taken them 15 years to get to where they are now. I mean, no one knew of SpaceX 20 years ago. It's only in the last few years that it's actually gaining momentum, because they're now actually achieving what they thought they'd be able to achieve, which is bloody amazing in my opinion.
Yeah, so that's cool. Enough space geeking, right? We're here to talk about Starlink and what kind of Starlink means. Now, there's the National Broadband Network. why would we care about something like Starlink? Well, I could answer that. Scott could answer that, but I'm sure you've got an answer
Yes.
for it too.
I do. So the thing about Starlink is Starlink is a high-speed, low-latency satellite internet service. Right now, when you compare Starlink to the National Broadband Network (NBN), you've got to look at some pros and cons of each type of service. So when you talk about the National Broadband Network and fiber optic NBN fiber, right? That's pretty damn good, right? Starlink will never compete against an NBN fiber service. Nothing beats the speed and reliability, performance of fiber, and that's not what it's designed to sort of do. Starlink is really bridging the gap between fiber and 5G to really provide internet access to really rural, remote regions of not only Australia but everywhere in the world. So it's those areas that are served by the not so favourable NBN types, like NBN Skymuster satellite or NBN fixed wireless. Those NBN types are the ones that Starlink just outperforms hands down. But when you talk about other NBN types, you're probably not going to want to change from an NBN fiber service to a Starlink service, for example.
I've seen a very interesting use case. It's not quite ready yet, but of course NBN's only in Australia, so you can only get obviously the services here. But when you look at Starlink being a global offering, and in some respects, you mentioned it's not going to be any faster than like NBN fiber within the country. But I can tell you, once you start getting overseas links in place, or even if you're looking at internet connectivity, say from here to various parts of the US or London or whatever, they can only travel on certain fiber routes where people have actually put fiber in the oceans to join the countries together and so forth. And sometimes those are not point to point between where you are and where somewhere else is. You've just got to follow wherever those tracks were put.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, here's a little interesting tidbit. Now, listen to this. The speed of light in the vacuum of space is twice as fast as the speed of light in fiber optic glass. You think about that for a minute. The Starlink satellites that are launching this month will have onboard lasers, space lasers, to actually beam signals between satellites at speeds that are twice as fast as what you can do in the fiber optic cables that are under the oceans. So bleeding edge type stuff.
Iron thrusters, space lasers, right? Got all of this, but it's about bringing internet service. Now, I noted when it first came out, I went online and went to Starlink, and it said, give us your address, because we're only sending you these wonderful mobile satellite dishes to a fixed address at the moment. Is there going to be, I like going camping and doing that kind of stuff. Is this the type of service I can actually take with me and set up somewhere else if I'm out in the bush or something like that to go and connect to the net? I know it's not there yet, but is that something you're kind of thinking of seeing in the future? Is that something that's being looked at?
Definitely.
You might not be able to tell me, so you don't have to.
Well, no, so I can tell you certain things I can't tell you, but I can tell you things that have been publicly announced and what Elon Musk himself has tweeted. He loves his Twitter and social media feeds. But anyway, so to answer your question, yes. Right now, no. So right now there are 1,600 satellites rotating above the Earth. Now, Nick, is this something that I can show on a screen here for our viewers?
Certainly. Let's make that magic happen. Here we go.
Okay, so what you're looking at here is the Earth, right? A globe of the Earth. And what you're looking at here with these circles are the Starlink satellites that are rotating above the Earth right now. Now, these satellites are 550 kilometers roughly above the Earth, and these are moving at 26,000 kilometers per hour, right? Now, if we go and rotate this around a little bit and have a look at what's over Australia right now, that's what we've got over Australia, beaming down internet signals down to Australia. And these little markers down here, they're ground stations that receive those signals. So this is why Starlink right now is only available in these lower parts of Australia. Once they get more ground stations in the northern parts, and there are some being built in Queensland and northern parts of WA, then coverage will extend. But more importantly, mobile coverage will be available once more satellites come are above the Earth, to increase the density and increase the throughput that they can receive. Each satellite has 20 gigabits per second of bandwidth that it can beam down. And look, that might not mean much to people, but it means that for people who want to put it on their caravan and go around Australia, you'll be able to do that very soon. A slightly different version of the dish that SpaceX are testing with the United States Air Force at the moment, because they're looking at testing this in their fighter pilots at the moment. Really exciting stuff.
Wow. So that line of satellites that's just over New Zealand, those are obviously ones that have newly been launched, right? Because they come out in this line and spread out and off they go.
Correct. That's right. So that's what's called a Starlink train. So if you ever look up in the night sky and see these little dots whizzing past overhead, that's a recent launch of Starlink satellites that's low enough to be seen, because their ion thrusters haven't moved them to their final orbits, which, as you can see, are about 550 kilometers above the Earth. So, yeah.
Yep. Wow. That's exceptional view. So, sorry, Scott, I'm going to go. So they're going to cover the whole planet in high-speed, low-latency internet.
Correct. And it's once these space lasers become operational and they can start beaming signals between satellites, means their dependence on these ground stations will be less. And even places like, Fiji, Vanuatu, all these sort of places that they're going to have really rubbish internet access. If you think the NBN's bad, you should see what these guys have to put up with out there. These guys here, they'll be watching Starlink very closely.
Yeah, now, so what's the real purpose of the ground stations? Because clearly, if I'm beaming data up into the sky and the data is then coming back down from the sky to me, I don't need a ground station, do I?
Correct. But you do need a point somewhere to connect to the rest of the internet. And that's what these ground stations do, is that they connect the satellite terminals to the rest of the global internet.
Yeah.
But if you've got, user A that's using a Starlink terminal and user B who's also using a Starlink terminal, well, hey, they can just go up and down through the satellites without having to traverse any of these ground stations. So, this is all coming very soon.
This is really cool.
Wow, that is super cool. And I can imagine this like having a real, people out in the bush who are poorly served by Sky Muster or, NBN Wi-Fi or, fiber to Tony Abbott's house or whatever it was, that they are really going to benefit from this type of stuff, as well as you said, Fiji, the Pacific Islands, and anyone out of the way, which is wonderful. So how would someone get access to this kind of stuff now? Because it's obviously you don't just go to JB Hi-Fi and buy Starlink, right? And especially if you're not bigger than home, you're a business. How would you actually go about doing that? And what role do you guys play in that kind of bit of the equation?
Yeah. So look, in order to get a Starlink service, what you want to do right now is to jump over to starlink.com. Type your address in there and see if your address is in coverage. I'll tell you now that unless you're in Victoria or New South Wales, you won't be in coverage just yet, because Starlink is still in beta. So SpaceX are very much still testing this out before they do a global launch. Saying that, they've got 500,000 pre-orders for Starlink already in their system, and about 90,000, I think, active services right now around the world. US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, England, certain countries have been given, I suppose, early access while they launch more satellites, build more ground stations, improve their software to really make this ready for prime time.
Now, Radek, I believe there's an issue in Australia with the capital cities at the moment.
There is. So it's something that we call Area 74, right? Now, this is not Area 51 type stuff that we talk about in the United States.
We got past that, okay. Yep.
Iron thrusters and space lasers. I wouldn't be surprised if we were doing an alien auto by the end.
No. Area 74 is to do with the Australian Communications and Media Authority. Now, this is really going to start geeking out, so I won't go too deep in this. But essentially, Starlink's license right now only allows them to cover low and remote density areas, i.e. the areas that are in purple on my screen right now. So if you want to just quickly show that, Nick, here, these are the areas that Starlink have a license to be able to service. And then if we zoom into over in Sydney, you'll see that that is not in coverage. Okay, and that's purely because of a dollar amount. Right? As soon as SpaceX and ACMA come to the table on, how many millions of dollars it's going to cost them to service those areas, they can. But keeping in mind that Starlink satellite-based internet services do not work well in like a CBD or a city area. You need a 100-degree field view of the sky to begin with, and there's only a certain number of units that you can have per square kilometer. And there is a great tool that we look at that shows the ground stations that are active at the moment. And the reason I like this tool is that it tells us which ground stations point to which satellites, and you can see the coverage areas and things like that. So there are lots of tools out there to be able to look at stuff like this. It just depends on how interested people are, I suppose.
I saw that purple area stretch down south into Antarctica. Is there much going on down there?
Right now, no, because there's no ground stations down there. But as soon as they get their space lasers working, they'll be able to cover Antarctica, like that. So
there you go.
But so that's Area 74. If you ever hear that in Starlink terminology.
Wow, that's super cool. Those tools are awesome as well. I love it. Makes me feel like I'm back at mission control and solving the Apollo 13 problem. But oh well, moving on. So talking about access to the internet, and one of the main things is for people to learn things. It's all about education, and I understand you guys are running a special promo at the moment. Do you want to maybe we chat about that, because I think it's probably a good time that people hear about that.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we're working on at the moment is a project called Project Halo. And Nick, if you want to share my screen again, I'll show what Project Halo is all about. And this is a $100,000 internet package grant that's been put together by us, NetVault, SpaceX, and Cisco, where we are, for the lack of a better term, launching Starlink services in Australia by giving away $100,000 worth of this technology to a regional school somewhere in Australia. So the grant covers the school and 30 students or teachers in their homes for internet access for 12 months. And this is really designed to give people that are suffering with poor internet access, might be served by NBN Sky Muster or poor NBN fixed wireless style services, where they can't do things like online learning, e-health, remote working from home, things like that. And with the pandemic and all the COVID-19 lockdowns and schools being forced to remote learning, this is really going to emphasize that particular use case. So applications for that do close the 15th of August. So if anyone is interested in a free $100,000 for worth of services for their school, see the link that I'm sure Nick's going to share that's on my screen at the moment for Project Halo.
There we go. And I popped the link on the screen so everybody can see that as well. Look, we have all the technologies here. Now we do have a video on that, but I think I'm going to struggle to play it because my bandwidth is acting up. So I'll be first in line. And it was funny, while you were talking, I went and tried to sign up. And as you said, being in the middle of Sydney, they went, it's coming, but not quite yet.
I'm more worried that your 1 gig NBN service is acting up.
Well, I have 7 people in the house trying to live stream Love Island, so that in 4K, so that tends to eat it up somewhat.
Only about 140 meg each. Oh, okay, well, that sounds a bit rough.
I'm running off my backup slow machine because my decent service book died overnight last night, of course, before I'm making an important call like this. So
it's probably going too fast on that 1 gig link. There's an interesting thing about Starlink, and to me, it's the technology and the whole solution is great. But from what I understand, this is actually a byproduct of a larger need.
Correct.
And what I've seen is that when you're launching all these rockets up into space and trying to get this bigger picture of, hey, putting people on other planets and so forth, so you've got to build all the infrastructure and design all the self-landing rockets, all this sort of thing. But in doing that, you're putting up so many launches, these all cost money. So what do? You actually have to be able to sell capacity to people about, hey, we can put your things in space, we can take your science experiments up, we can do all these other things. That's great, but there wasn't enough of them.
That's exactly
because
right.
of that, you need something that's actually going to help fund the bigger picture. And that's where this idea came from. And now this idea is taken off in such a wild way. It's funding the satellite. It's actually funding the rockets going up and down by taking all the satellites there and achieving other goals at the same point. But here's a spin-off business that is just taken off and doing wonderful things. I'm pretty impressed with that.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, who knows what was going through Elon Musk's head at the time? But obviously, if you want to colonize Mars, you're going to need communications services in Mars. How best to do that? Well, you put satellites rotating around Mars, and then I'm guessing that sort of translated to doing that here in Australia, because on Earth, sorry, not just Australia, but. In order to fund, getting to Mars, we're talking billions of dollars in funding needed for it. And it's no secret that the reason that SpaceX have created Starlink was to create recurring revenue and obviously solve some connectivity problems, but create recurring revenue to fund their mission of getting to Mars. So this will be hopefully a good revenue earner for SpaceX to be able to put that straight back through. And launch these rockets up to Mars. And for anyone that's following SpaceX, the Starship rocket and the booster BN3, I think they're up to, they're testing that in the next week or two, and it's going to be the first time they're going to launch this Starship. It's actually called Starship, the largest rocket ever constructed in history, and they're going to be testing that very soon. So.
There was one disappointing thing to me, at least, out of all of this, and that I heard the US government is looking at how to tax spaceflight, and there's a bill going through at the moment that talks about this. And I thought, oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like the NBN tax that's going to be coming soon here for us in Australia, and I mean, if governments get involved, they try and tax you wherever they can, I suppose. The thing that's really interesting is of the Starlink services that we're deploying at the moment, the results that we're seeing are really promising from a speed perspective. Everyone thinks, space services, space internet services, they're horribly slow. This is rubbish. How on earth can this actually work? And Nick, if you can share my screen again.
Sure.
I suppose the reason that this is able to work is that traditional satellite services are using high-altitude geostationary orbits. So these satellites are 36,000 kilometers above the Earth, rotating at the same speed as what the Earth does. These Starlink satellites, they're these closer ones in low Earth orbits. So that's how they're able to do this much faster with such low latency, as in such low ping. And if I even show you guys here we go here. These are some Starlink services that we've deployed in Victoria. And if we have a look at the speeds on these, we've got a 38 millisecond ping average on that service. 219 megabits per second is the average download speed that this unit gets. Look at that. It even receives a maximum of 412 megabits per second. And we test these every 15 minutes, and you can see, look, there's the last one there, 250. 140, so it does vary a little bit, 192, 200, but you can see the speeds that these get is phenomenally better than your traditional NBN SkyMuster or geostationary satellite services. So this is the use case for regional and rural Australia. Those people at home, businesses, mining companies will be lapping this service up.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And those latency,
sorry, Scott, you go.
I was going to say that those latency numbers are actually not that offensive. I mean, yeah, it's not like 4 to 5 milliseconds Sydney to Melbourne sort of on fibre return time, but 30 to 40 milliseconds is actually very usable. It's to the point where you can have good video conferencing, good media solutions across that. Round trip time to Perth is 60 milliseconds across fibre. So if we're talking about bouncing off a couple of satellites in the low Earth orbit at about 35 to 40 milliseconds, that's very usable.
Exactly.
But I think the space lasers are going to change it as well. So if you talk about, I'm going to say that one more time, space lasers, do they have space sharks? No, because space sharks with lasers would just be the coolest thing ever. But anyway, moving on. But if, as you say, light's traveling double the speed, well, it's back up to the speed of light because it's going through a vacuum, then long distance trips using this technology is going to have less latency. So, for example, using a terminal server in London is going to become usable, whereas right now on 300 to 400 milliseconds round trip latency, it's not usable at all.
If you think about that latency time, let's look at London for a minute. Yes, it is about 300 milliseconds latency because of the route through the world that the fibre takes. I've seen companies that have actually gone and run entire, like another 10 to 20,000 kilometre fibre runs just to shave 5 to 10 milliseconds off a response time for a global transit, and they're selling it to banks and various people that need that really low latency international response times because that really is real money to them. This is a whole new ballgame. It's very interesting.
Correct. Yeah, correct. So this is why it's such an exciting area to follow, and I love being involved with what we're doing with SpaceX and Project Halo and everything that's happening from a SpaceX perspective, because this is really the next evolution for humanity, is to, as I said earlier, make humanity a multi-planetary species.
How cool. I reckon that's a brilliant place to end the live stream. Radek, thank you so much. That was absolutely fascinating. I don't care about anybody else. I had a ball with that one. That's right in my sweet spot. But that was brilliant. Now, for everybody who's watched the live stream, or is watching online, or is watching on Facebook or YouTube, or even listening to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, thank you so much for listening. If please like, subscribe. The algorithms like you liking. Subscribing is good for us, and leave a comment if you'd like us to chat about something. And while we're here, before we go, Project Halo is available with grants closing very soon on the 15th of August. And if you want to go and sign up a school, the link is https://netvault.net.au/Project Halo, HALO. So I guess that's us. That's it from us. Radek, thank you so much. Scott?
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thanks Radek, for coming along.
Nice.
Thanks, Radek. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you all have a fantastic day. See you now.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Do you want high-speed, low-latency internet powered by Starlink free for you and your school? Find out how in this video. For those that aren't aware, Starlink is the brainchild of Elon Musk and SpaceX, whereby Starlink are aiming to cover the entire world in high-speed, low-latency internet access. Now, when I'm referring to speeds, I'm talking about speeds of between 200 and 300 megabits per second and latency or ping of around 20 to 40 milliseconds. This will be available anywhere in the world, which will be a real boom for those regional or rural parts of the globe. This is where Project Halo comes in. Project Halo is a $100,000 internet package grant that's been put together by NetVault, SpaceX and Cisco to give a regional school in Australia the opportunity to experience internet speeds of the 21st century. As part of this grant, 30 students or teachers will receive a Starlink terminal for use in their home, aka Dishy McFlatface. These terminals are included as part of the grant, free for 12 months. Also included in the grant is one of these units for the school itself, along with NetVault's seamless 4G LTE failover technology, which is powered by Cisco routers to deliver reliability and security for the school. Also included are 10 of these Cisco video phones that the school can use throughout the building's for video conferencing facilities in the school. If you would like to receive this groundbreaking technology, then have a look at the link in the description below for Project Halo, and then talk to your teachers, talk to your principal, and have them apply for the Project Halo $100,000 internet grant. The application process is actually really simple. All you need to do is tell us in 500 words or less how this sort of technology can be of benefit for you and your school. You can also include a short 2 to 3 minute video outlining what the issues are that your school is facing and how Starlink and Project Halo can help address those needs. Now, applications for Project Halo close on July 31, so start talking to your teachers, start talking to your school principal, and start getting some thoughts together on how you can apply for Project Halo. So get your applications in, and best of luck.